Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art, and I'm here after a long break. And so I'm here to tell you what's going on. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. If you're just watching this as your first episode, please understand that this is a unique, set of circumstances. Normally, what we do here is we talk about mindfulness and compassion and practicing forgiveness, and we do these things in order to ground ourselves and to place ourselves in the present moment, because the present moment is where our life happens, right? Our life does not happen in the future in some imagined way, and it doesn't happen in some memory, the way of some memory that we have from the past. It happens right now. And so the work that we talk about here is how we come into the present moment and how we keep ourselves in the present moment and how we stay regulated in that present moment so that we can really interact with our lives on a moment by moment basis in a depth and a connection that ultimately results in an intuitive wisdom. Okay. But today, I'm going to talk about something a little bit more specific. So, as you know, I haven't recorded an episode here it's got to be at least, let's see, today is Thursday. It's got to be at least like a week and a half since I've recorded an episode here, maybe even 2 weeks. I've lost track. And the reason I lost track is because while I've been gone, I had to take a trip from Colorado to New York, driving the whole way, and that's for reasons I'll explain in a second. I drove all the way there and all the way back. It's about 60 hours of actual driving, 60 hours of the wheels turning, right? If you divide, I think it's 1,800 something miles by 75 miles an hour, it comes out to about 60 hours of wheels spinning driving. And I did those 60 hours of driving within like 4 days, right? Which is kind of physically almost impossible, right? You might be asking, I'm sure you're asking, well, what the heck would somebody do that for? And this is the big punchline, I guess, the big reveal here. And it's going to be really interesting because it's going to, it's really opening up a lot of fodder for our talks here. Because as you know, I talk a lot about my childhood trauma and the CPTSD that I live with as a result of that childhood trauma. Well, one half of the source of that trauma, my mother, passed away last Monday. So Monday, the 24th of April, I think it was, right? It was sudden. It was unexpected. Her condition had declined quite a bit, or has been declining in terms of her dementia. She suffered from Parkinson's disease, which is not necessarily known as a fatal disease. There's lots of people who live long, productive lives with Parkinson's disease. And she was also experiencing some dementia, right? Now, of course, dementia, and especially within the context of Parkinson's, which is like a neurological disease, right? It's the whole nervous system, right? And of course, I'm sitting here, I'm probably one of the only people in the world who can sit here and say that, yeah, her nervous system has been, experiencing trauma since she was a little girl. And it never stopped. And in fact, that's the first thing that came to my mind. The very first thought that I had when I found out last Monday, the first thought was that she doesn't have to be angry anymore. She can finally just relax. She doesn't have to make things perfect anymore. And so then the second thought that I had was that, actually, no, that's not true. It's not a thought that I had, but something that occurred to me throughout the time that I was, well, first of all, I should say that there's a tremendous amount of guilt that I feel, because I have not been in touch with my mother for the last over a year, and this is really interesting, right? Because, I when I very intentionally and deliberately told both my parents that I need to be separate from them. I need to be away from them for a period of time. And that reason is, or the reason for that is because, as I've told you here before, the way that the nervous system experiences trauma is very, very specific, okay? And it's very important to understand this. if you're someone who suffers from trauma. So please understand this, okay? And please let me know if you have any questions about this, okay? Because this is really, really important, okay? So when you experience trauma, right, whether that's trauma as a child or trauma even as an adult, right? Maybe there's, now certainly there's two kinds of trauma, right? There's chronic trauma, or what we call complex trauma, in terms of complex PTSD, CPTSD, right? And then there's just trauma, right? Now, trauma can be something like a terrible car accident. Trauma can be getting held up on the street, with a gun or a knife or something. Trauma can be even losing a loved one can be traumatic, right? Certainly, you talk about soldiers who experience a bomb going off, and they're people who they're with, they're company men and women, they get killed and horribly wounded and stuff, and that's traumatic, right? So trauma can be a singular event, or it can be a chronic, condition, like a period of time in which trauma is constantly there. Now, when we talk about childhood abuse, it's almost always the former, or the latter rather. It's the chronic form, right? It's the form of just every day there's a there's trauma, right? There's the hurt that the trauma causes, right? And so the point is, though, that whether it happens as an adult or it happens as a child, well, of course it's going to be different, but whenever it happens, and whether it's a singular thing or a chronic thing, what happens is when that moment happens, your nervous system it's almost like it takes a snapshot of it, right? It's like, oh crap, this thing happened and I got to remember this, right? That's what your nervous system is essentially doing, right? But now as a child, right, your nervous system is forming, right? So that's why PTSD as an adult in a bad accident or something, you might have some nightmares for a while, you might have some intrusive thoughts, you might have some moments of like getting into a sweat here and there, but generally speaking, as you can, sort of work through it in an intentional and conscious way through therapy, it's generally speaking something that can be pretty well managed, right? Let's put it that way, okay? When it happens as a child, it's a little different. Now, even if it's a singular traumatic event as a child, but especially if it's a chronic traumatic event or set of events as a child, what's happening there is that your nervous system is literally forming itself around this experience, okay? And what that means is that when that experience happens, your nervous system, again, kind of takes a snapshot of what's happening at that time that it's happening, right? And so the important thing, the thing that I'm trying to get to here, and I'm sorry I'm being a little wordy here, obviously out of practice, I haven't done a podcast in a while and still recovering from this awful drive I made. But the point is that when we experience childhood trauma, right, whatever those triggers are, right, whatever triggers that trauma, triggers the trauma not as a 53-year-old adult experiencing the trauma that he had as a child. It's actually when I, as a 53-year-old guy, experience a trigger of my trauma, the nervous system that's being triggered is actually the 8-year-old me, or the 7 or 6 or whatever it was, however old I was when all this stuff was going on. For me, that was everything from like 4 years old right through, now basically, and so the point is, though, right? The point, and this is really the important point, and this is the interesting thing I want to tell you about what happened with my mother, is that when that trigger happens, it's not triggering, again, I know I said this, but it's so important to understand this. It's not like I'm sitting here as a 53-year-old guy saying, oh man, this, my mother's, simple question that she just asked me is creating this trauma in my body. No, that's not what's happening. The question that my mother asked me was something that's from 40-something years ago, that is impacting me as though I were, again, 5 or 6 or 7 years old, whatever it is. Now, why is that important, right? That's important because as a 53-year-old man, I have lots of coping mechanisms. I have lots of ways to regulate myself. I have lots of ways to handle myself. At 7 years old, I did not have such tools, nor did you, nor does anyone. That's the point of growing, right? We're building those tools as we grow, and that adds a second layer of what's going on here, right? So what happens is when I experience my mother as a 53-year-old man, I'm really experiencing her as a 7-year-old child. Like the way that my body reacts to her is as a 7-year-old child, right? Now, the other thing that happens through this process is while we're growing, we're supposed to be, again, developing systems that can regulate all of this, right? We're building systems that help us handle difficult situations. But my system was broken because it was way overtaxed when I was a child through trauma. And so therefore, I don't have that regulatory system, that regulating system. I don't have it. It's broken. It's broken for me just like it might be broken for you. The thing is that I had no idea that it was broken until like a year ago when I started looking at it. A year ago is when I first realized that this was all part of my childhood trauma. Because again, as I've told you here before, it's my mother, right? It's like, this is life. This is the world. I don't know any different. I don't have this other experience I can go to that says, wait. My mother is doing something wrong because I see that this is different, right? And then for me, of course, because my father left when I was about 5 years old, I didn't have even another parent to sort of counterbalance the whole thing. And so what it results in is that I was under constant attack as a child. That's how it felt. And being under constant attack as a child, I built a nervous system that was, really used to being under attack, right? And that's why, as I've told you, when I go to Chipotle with my kids and there's a little problem with the order, my nervous system reacts to that as though I'm like, lost in a big scary place and something really horrible is going to happen to me. Of course it's not. It's just a quesadilla, right? And so the interesting thing that happened was that throughout the weekend, I realized that I had this easiness in me, right? I had this sort of almost a lightness in me. It was the absence of the fear that this 5-year-old inside of me was no longer afraid. And I went through a bit of a ritual with that, and I definitely, honored that for him. I definitely, I hugged him and told him, I'm so happy for you that you don't have to be afraid anymore. This is amazing. It was really powerful, really powerful. And it just goes to show again, and one of the things that, originally, I'm sorry, I know I'm skipping around here a little bit, and please pardon me, my emotions are still very raw and difficult here, because that's the dichotomy, right? That's the duality here, that it's still my mother, right? And there still were some really beautiful, precious moments. There still were some really, really amazing things that happened that I kind of, I have to love her in certain ways, right? And again, you gotta be able to see both, right? You gotta be able to see that you can love aspects of this person and even aspects of your experience with this person, and you can still feel threatened by this person and still feel threatened by aspects of your relationship with this person, right? But here's the one thing that really showed up that was really amazing is that, when I first heard the news, I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the funeral. Not only am I overwhelmed with just the feelings and the guilt, because again, as I told you a year ago, I said I need to be separate because the thing is that as I'm working through this, I don't think I got to finish that thought, pardon me. As I'm working through this, right, I can't have that trigger, right? And again, it's not that my mother is saying something that she said to me when I was 6 years old that's making me, it's just the sound of her voice. It's just the essence of her, right, puts me into this state. It's amazing. It's so powerful. And so I needed to be separate so that I could work on myself for the good of myself and my family. And so I don't apologize for that, but yet I feel so guilty, especially hearing my father say that she'd been asking about me. And like, it's so hard, and I'm sure that there's some of you out there who are going through something similar. Honor the difficulty, right? Honor it because it is hard. It's really, really, really hard. And it's okay that it's hard, right? And it's okay that you get it wrong a little bit. And it's okay that you effed it up a little bit, right? Because as I'm feeling this guilt and I didn't want to go, right? Like I was like, I do not want to go because I feel so guilty. And I feel also that like, I feel so judged by all of her, brothers and sisters and this whole, just in that whole house. I feel so defensive and I feel so like tense. I don't want to go. Like that's how powerful this trauma is because you know what? When I got there, none of that was there. My uncles and aunts were as accepting and as pleasant as I could possibly imagine them being. They weren't judging. They weren't making fun of me. They weren't, being, awful to me. What that leads me to believe is that all those times where I perceived them attacking me, they probably weren't even attacking me. It was just my nervous system perceiving it as an attack because I was in the presence of my mother. It's so intense the way this works. It's so intense. And so you can work on this. You don't have to wait till your mother dies, right? You can work on this. Mindfulness and self-compassion is how you do it. And hopefully therapy if you have it available to you, right? But mindfulness and self-compassion can get you in touch with this aspect and this understanding that, wait a minute, this is not me and this is not even this woman that's doing this. This is something that's so old and ancient and just baked into me. And as I realize that, I can work to undo some of that. Because again, just seeing the absence of it, just like that in one day, everything was different. In a way that was truly amazing. All right, folks. Well, this was a little bit of a rambling episode here. Definitely not not well planned out on this one, but that was kind of the intention. So I hope that you understand, and I hope that you forgive me for my absence. I know that you will, because I get your emails and messages and see the comments. But yeah, also I wanted to just let y'all know that, with this experience, I'm feeling a renewed inspiration to work with trauma. And so you can all be expecting a workshop in the near future, followed by a program. Okay, I've got like a 12-week program, not like a 12-week. I have an actual 12-week program that is designed to help us to uncover, untangle, and understand our trauma. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you. I wish you well.